Hello, welcome to the Wombs of the World podcast. My name is Charlotte Brielle. I am your host and founder of Wombs of the World. The purpose of this podcast is to explore how culture is dynamic, but birth is universal. And I am so excited for today's episode. We have Edwina joining us from the Ostara Initiative that is about ending prison birth. And so she's going to be talking to us today about what it means to be a prison doula. We're going to explore themes on trauma-informed care and cultural competency, and really just geek out, as we always do, over our shared passion for better birth outcomes. Welcome to today's episode. I'm so grateful to have you here.
Let's do it.
Would you mind by starting just by introducing yourself and a little bit about the journey that brought you to this work?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it is my pleasure to be here. My name is Edwina. I use she, her pronouns. My journey to this work is I am a prison doula with the Ostara Initiative, which means that I work with pregnant and postpartum individuals who are incarcerated in the US. I specifically work in the state of Oregon, but the nonprofit that I work for has projects in multiple states, including Minnesota, Wisconsin, Alabama, and in the Federal Bureau of Prisons as well. And my way of getting here was, long and non-linear, but I'm happy to just like be here and kind of share my perspective on birth in the carceral setting and how that relates to just like everything that goes on in the birth world and wombs of the world, because I think it's just so beautiful to share so many different perspectives around birth, and we don't often think about people giving birth in prison and jail, and so I'm just excited to share a little bit about that.
Amazing. I'm so grateful that you're here to share about it. That was something I was getting my master's in social work with a specialty in maternal mental health. And it
I
really,
also have my master's in social work. What the heck? We have so much in common. It's
so
wild.
much in common. Um, but that was at the time something that I really, really wanted to focus on because there's just absolutely no attention brought to that space. So I'm so glad that you are working on that. Will you share with us a little bit about like how you ended up in this space because it is so niche?
Yeah, I think before ending up in the carceral space, just to start off on my journey as like a doula, I was born in the Philippines. My wonderful mother gave birth to four of us in like a very remote area of the Philippines. And that's where so much of my family is now. And she moved with my father to the US when I was 6 months old. And in the
Wow.
Philippines, there was no option to have a medicated birth or a cesarean section where she was. And so her four first kids were, unmedicated births. And then when she got to the States and had my little sister 5 years after me, she was not 100% comfortable in English, even though she spoke English fine. It was a completely new world, new system.
Hmm.
She was 40 or 37 when she had me, and then 42 when she had my sister, her last baby. And because she was in this new environment, and my dad, he wasn't able to be there for my birth because he was sorting out our visa situation in the States. So this is my dad's first birth because my mom was married. This was her second husband. So like all that to say, there was just no advocate. Everyone wanted to be an advocate. Nobody knew what they were doing. My mom couldn't communicate properly, and she ended up having every intervention possible during that experience. And
Oh,
just reflecting on my own mother's story, and I don't know, I'm just someone who just believes that that's like all kind of entangled and entrenched in your own story. I just think that's kind of one of the reasons, and there are many, but one of the huge biggest reasons as to why I became a doula. Like if only she had someone to advocate for her and read all of the cultural things that were happening and just stand up for her. This was a woman who like was completely capable of giving birth in the way that she wanted to, but she had all of her
100%.
power stripped of her. And that story alone is like, oh yeah, makes me want to be a doula, and is just so happy to be in this work. And then just like along the way there were just so many signs from the universe that this was like what I needed to be doing. My first baby ever that I supported coming into the world was born on my birthday, which is like so cool. And I take that as just a sign that I'm like on the right path. And then, yeah, and then just the opportunity came. I was doing so many, as you know, like doulas don't just, we're not just doulas. We do like so many different tangential off of being doulas. And so in that, throwing that web of things, I found myself working in with I just kind of was recruited, kind of like I guess I'll get into that story later, but I found myself working in prisons, and I'm just so excited. I could not even imagine not doing this as a doula now.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story of your mother. And I want to definitely circle back to that as well, because I think that there's so much that our listeners could benefit from in learning how we can support people that are like in the diaspora and far from home. And there's just so many places and spaces where people need extra support. And that's something I love about birth work. It's like we learn these tools that help people in the birth room, but then also outside of the birth room, and we
Yeah.
become advocates essentially for human rights and the betterment of culture and people and experiences. And so you're full in. You are all in
Oh
that
yeah.
space.
Oh yeah. I could
Um,
talk about that
so
forever.
so for our listeners, will you explain like what is a doula working within the prison system, and then also from there paint the picture of what someone who is incarcerated giving birth, like what that scene might be like for them, like some stigmas and some of the misconceptions, and really just paint the picture of what that means
Yes.
and what that looks like.
I think that's like an amazing question because you're right. It's not the same as it is in the community setting. So we refer to it
Hmm.
as like community setting outside of the carceral space, and then a prison doula um, is the difference there. And so when you're a doula in a prison or a jail, you are often someone's only consistent medical person. And that's very different than being a doula in the community because we're often
Hmm.
saying, and we have to say, I am not a medical professional because we're not.
Yep.
I have to defer to someone else. And here are some resources that I would give you. But in a carceral setting, there are no resources oftentimes, or there are very few resources, and very few places where people can go to get their questions answered. So it's a lot more responsibility that you're holding because you really are, and you have to be aware of this like bigger power dynamic at play. And um, the medical system, like they're just inundated with if folks in that system. And so the things that you say are held with a lot of importance in the mind of your client. And the relationship is a lot more intimate as well because you're not only meeting with them, in a typical community package. I'm meeting with clients 2 times prenatally. I'm there for the birth, and then I'll meet with them 2 times postpartum. But in the prison setting, I am meeting with them every week, at least once a week, as soon as they get in. Um, and then for a year after birth every week to make sure that there
Wow.
is this continuity of care because that time postpartum and prenatal time not only like hormonally and physiologically is just so important, but you just need so much, and in order to go against and improve a lot of these outcomes that we often see with folks that are incarcerated, our job as doulas is to just give as much care as possible. And so that just requires a lot more. And as a result, the relationship is so much more intimate in many ways than in the community space. So yeah, that's just like a little blurb about what the main differences are. I feel like there was a second part of your question, but I forgot
Yeah,
it.
so the second part for our viewers or listeners, can you essentially kind of paint the scene of what the pregnancy and birth and postpartum experience may be like for someone who's incarcerated?
Yes. So immediately I want to dispel the question that I get constantly, which is how are people getting pregnant in prison and jail? I don't think a lot of people know this, but in prisons and jails, you cannot touch each other. That is probably another huge difference between doula care. You can't hug your client, you can't really massage them. It's all relationship, verbal relationship,
Wow,
and
cool.
and power setting, like context setting and information. It's like as a doula, we say it's physical, informational, and emotional. You really rely on that, like emotional and informational pillar, those two pillars, with enough relationship building in the system that you work in. In some of our projects, we're able to have contracts that say as soon as the person is admitted into labor and in the hospital, because folks give birth in the hospital, they don't give birth in prison in like the facility. Sometimes we're able to do our doula thing and do massage and touch them, but that's not usually the case. I usually go into a birth assuming that that's not allowed,
Wow.
um, and figuring out what we can do. And there's a lot of things that we can do, which I'm sure I'll get to
Of
later in
course.
this podcast. But in terms of people getting pregnant, people are pregnant once they are when they get to prison. And oftentimes people find out that they're pregnant upon intake. Um, or they
Wow.
were pregnant and with the nature of the system, it takes a long time to like get sentenced and then find out you're going to prison. So people were either pregnant in the beginning of that experience or fall pregnant in the middle. But they are pregnant once they get there, and then we'll meet our clients in some at some point in that journey. Some of our clients are already have just given birth, and so you can only imagine like what that is like to have just given birth and then have to be separated from your baby. I feel like those are the clients that don't get as much light, so I definitely want
Hmm.
to make sure I speak to that journey as well because postpartum is such a challenging time already that to be in a facility and people don't recognize you as a pregnant person. So then people don't
Mm.
even remember that you have kids. Like that requires doula care and someone to just see you and hear you through that experience. So yeah, that's a little bit about the context. In addition to
Hmm.
being doulas, we're also teaching childbirth education classes or postpartum ed classes or perinatal mental health classes every week. Every facility is different. So at the facility that I work at, we teach like multiple groups a week. And so they see me in as a teacher as well. And sometimes I'm teaching yoga and sometimes I'm teaching curriculum. And then I'm meeting with people as a doula weekly.
And you mentioned that you meet with them on a regular basis for that entire first year postpartum. What do those visits entail?
Those visits entail so I remember when I first started, and when I'm in community with clients, I'm like, to be completely transparent with people, sometimes I really struggle when someone's not asking for me to do a postpartum package. They just want the typical birth, labor delivery package. And I struggle with my second postpartum visit because I'm like, well, the birth's over. Like, what do we talk about now? It's 6 weeks later. Like, I guess we'll just close out our relationship. And so when I first started in this work as a prison doula and I realized I was going to be meeting people week to week for a whole year, I was like, what the hell do we talk about? Like, you know? It's such a long time, but you come to
Yeah.
realize there is so much to talk about. And like I said, you are their only consistent, oftentimes, person that they're seeing. So you very much become
Hmm.
like family or like a support person to them. That is very vital to their mental health and self-confidence and mental stability. And there is a lack of continuity of care already in the hospital system just
Of
because of the
course.
way that system is. And so you can only imagine the gaps that happen when the hospital system get mixed with the correctional system, their carceral system. And so we as doulas are just like kind of creating the bridge between all of those systems. And we're also hearing so much about the person's story. And oftentimes, people that are incarcerated have the most beautiful stories that we get to hold as doulas, and they've never had been able to have the time in their lives to process a lot of the things that they've been
Mm.
holding. Um, because one of the biggest entry points to incarceration is just living a life that is full of trauma or having parents that that have survived traumatic events. And so you're just holding all of that stuff in your DNA and in your heart and in your body. And us as doulas, we're holding that and taking that in, and just
Hmm.
providing the space for that. And, as a social worker, it's hard for me because I'm like my doula self, but then I'm also social worker trained. So I try not to mix those titles, but you're going through someone's biopsychosocial life story, and that takes so much
100%.
time. And it is so impactful to sit with someone and do that and just create
Hmm.
such a beautiful, deep relationship and to see how impactful it is because no one's ever taken the time to do that for them before. And it is so healing for every party involved. And so, in terms of meeting with them every week for those 12 months, like that is a lot of the work is just like listening, asking questions, and a lot of the time it is just sitting with people in silence through some really hard stuff that they're going through.
Mm. Thank you for doing for doing the work. Can you explain to us, to me and the us behind me, what happens to the child, to the baby, once the baby is born?
Yeah. So, also, no need to thank me for the work. I feel so lucky to be able to do this work. Like, I don't even want to thank me for the work. It's just like wild that I even get to do this. Most of our team, I should say too, are people who have been previously incarcerated and had to live through this experience themselves. That's a really important part of our leadership team and the people that are on our team in our projects across the
Beautiful.
US because there are lots of parts of the experience that I cannot understand not having
Mm,
gone through it myself. So after birth, it really depends on how the birth went, but typically a baby and a birthing parent, and I also will say in the community, I use gender neutral pronouns for folks that are pregnant, but the prison system is so binary that we do use those gendered binary
okay.
words sometimes, or oftentimes. And so the baby and mom will be separated within 24 hours normally. Sometimes, if a doula is there, we can often advocate for more time, depending on how the birth went. And there's a lot, it kind of really depends on a lot of different factors, but usually within 24 hours, the baby and mom are separated, and mom will go back to the facility. And then usually the baby is taken by like a friend or a family member, or in the hardest scenarios, by CPS. And so we as doulas try to advocate out of those situations because
Hmm.
it is best for mom and baby to, one, have the most contact possible post-birth, and also to still be within that same family system. So that's a big part of our job as well, is to advocate for that.
Mm, absolutely. Wow. So I have so many follow-up questions. I guess my first one is about breastfeeding or feeding the
Mhm.
baby. Does does the mother have the opportunity to pump and provide milk for her baby, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it depends on the resources available at the facility. In
Hmm.
Oregon, we are very lucky that we actually have a service that allows our moms and birthing folks to continue to pump if they so wish. Not everybody wants that.
Totally.
But if they want, they get to pump, and then they are able to ship the milk to wherever their baby is. And it is something that we as doulas are always protecting because um,
Hmm.
sometimes, for whatever reason, someone forgets that someone's breastfeeding or chest feeding, and then, or they don't have the proper pump supplies or whatever. So we're just always making sure that that is protected and allowed for, because that's one of the only bonds that is able to be consistent after birth once that separation does happen. So breastfeeding is super important. When someone is still at the hospital, it's like totally normal, as if it's a community birth. You have that golden hour where you and or mom and baby are skin to skin, chest feeding, breastfeeding, and the nurses are there, just like any other hospital birth that you've seen. It's kind of once at the facility where that becomes a little bit tricky, and it depends on the facility and their resources. But at ours, we're very lucky that we're able to have that. And then at our groups, we bring lactation cookies to make sure that moms hormonally are continuing to be able to pump, because I would say that is one of the biggest challenges when you're separated from your baby. Your
Yeah.
body is not getting the signals to produce, and so keeping that production up is already so hard when you
So
have your
hard.
baby in the community. You can only imagine how hard and then how heart-wrenching it is when that becomes a struggle, because moms just feel like they can't have a relationship with their baby anymore.
Mhm.
So we try to supplement as much as possible as doulas.
And in your experience, how often are moms allowed to see their babies?
So it really depends on who is taking care of the baby and whereabouts they live. The nature of prison is that they are often located in very rural areas, and so that means that they're really hard to get to by design. So some of our folks, have community nearby and are able to see their babies multiple times a week, sometimes once a week. There are also amazing programs in the facility that like kind of do nursery type stuff where folks are able to do Head Start and not kindergarten, but like
Awesome.
daycare and have that playtime with their kids. Sometimes there's like daddy programs or breastfeeding programs. So it depends on how many programs like you're signed up for that you can see your baby. But I would say it is a huge struggle for folks that are coming from rural communities and their families that
Yeah.
are taking care of their kids are rural. I mean, we sometimes see partners coming and driving 6 hours in a day just to have that like 1 or 2 hours with mom and baby. And, for those folks, it just requires so many more resources, so much more time. They're staying at hotels in order to
Yeah.
stay and have those visitations, food, all of those things. And so it's a humongous barrier to keep that bond going, especially if you come
Mhm.
from a rural or faraway place from the facility.
And is this maybe you just because of what you said earlier, are moms allowed to hold baby? Because you were mentioning earlier that there's no touch. So are they allowed to hold their child?
Yeah, great question. So when doulas are involved in the births that I've been involved in, yes, because that is part of like the implementation of our program is that we try to make sure that all of these things are met because it's great for the baby and the birth outcome
Yep.
and the mom's perinatal mental health. And so that is like ideally what happens when we're there. In births around the country, I mean, there was just an amazing article put out around jail births. And birth in jail is like a completely different story, or a birth in a prison where doulas don't work is completely different because there's no one there who is a professional to say, hey, this is what a normal birth looks like. This is what needs to happen in order
Oof.
to, have great outcomes for everyone involved.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so you can only imagine the power that gets stripped away when no one's there to give voice to that person.
Hmm.
But all that to say, in the births that I've been a part of, mom gets to touch baby and hold baby for all of those days that she's in the hospital. And that's completely like protected by the nurses, by staff,
Hmm.
everyone there wants that.
And but when baby comes for visits to the prison,
Oh,
are they allowed to
yeah.
hold their child during those visits?
During the visits, yes, they can hold their child.
I am so curious as to the experience that the other people working the birth have. So the people that the nurses at the hospital, the OBs that are responsible for the birth, are they trained? Do they have specific training on how to support somebody that's coming from the prison system? Or is that a bridge that you fill? Like what does their training look like? And and then I will be essentially what I would like for us to talk about is trauma-informed care. But let's start with
Yeah.
what their training is.
Such a natural bridge into trauma-informed care. I was gonna like talk about that organically. So it really depends, just like a birth in the community and with like all of the aspects that can come into someone's identity who's giving birth, like their culture, their religion. You might have staff that day that's comfortable with that, and you might have staff that's
Hmm.
really uncomfortable with that. And it's the same for this context. And so you as the doula get to be the person that is comfortable with that, and you have to figure out ways to make everyone very comfortable with it. Most of the time, again, in like my personal experiences, we have had amazing staff that like they at least know how birth should look because they've done birth a bajillion times, right, in the hospital.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
they treat it as a normal birth. And that's part of being trauma informed is especially in a carceral setting, it's pretty simple. You just treat someone like a human. Um, it's wild.
It's like I know
It's
it's like
incredible.
it's so wild like you say that and it's so simple and it's just like what enrages me and gives me so much hope in our field is that there's such a disconnect between but just like the humanity of the person constantly there's
Yeah,
this huge disconnect of just treating people like human beings and seeing them as human beings and so many of the solutions like so many of the problems are solved with just seeing
yeah,
someone as a full human and giving them that respect.
exactly. It's
It's
so
infuriating
true.
that it's not treated that way, and it's so hopeful that it's so simple. Like the solutions are so simple.
Yeah, the solutions are so simple and it is infuriating. I totally agree with that. And also, it's humbling because I can't sit
Mm,
here and say that I was not socialized to think of someone who's incarcerated as a bad person. We live in a
hmm.
society where that is the shit, excuse my French, but like stuff we're fed from
Totally.
like the Ronald Reagan era, of the war on drugs. It's the DARE program that we all grew up in, especially like
Hmm.
you and I who are a similar generation. Of course, that people don't realize that people who are in this situation are humans, and it's just the sad part of our society and how we're
Hmm.
socialized. And these people
Hmm.
deserve dignity just like anybody else. And one of the great ways to be trauma informed in this setting is we're able to, when they are in labor, they don't have to have shackles on them. When they're in labor, they don't have to have their typical prison outfit. They get to have certain, luxuries, quote unquote, to make it feel like once they're in that situation, it is like a totally normal birth situation. And
Good.
so that just helps because, as you know, there are biases that people don't even realize they have with regards to race, and then certainly with regards to when you see someone who has a prison outfit on, your mind just like has these biases, and then you are treated a certain way. And so, first, being able to strip that away is the biggest part of trauma-informed care. And then, on top of that, treating someone like a human and just reminding everyone in the room that this is a normal experience and restoring the humanity in it is just something
Hmm.
you're doing over and over and over again in the prison doula birth setting.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I think that that can extend just the reminder of humanity, what you were mentioning earlier, of like anyone in any context showing up to give birth. And so I feel as though oftentimes my role as doula is to facilitate that experience, because the thing is, it's like when you go to a hospital to give birth, everyone at that hospital is at work, and they might be
Hmm.
having a good day, they might be having a bad day, they might have had a really terrible day the day before, they might have drama going on at home. It's like you never, it's like when you're entering traffic and you don't know what's happening in the lives of the cars around you. And like that's how they're behaving. I kind of feel that way when you go into any kind of hospital setting. It's like you don't know what's going on in their lives. And so also treating the providers as humans and having compassion for them in their life as humans. And then inviting them. So oftentimes as doula, like I'm there because like that is like my whole job. I'm not at work. I'm at a miracle. I'm at a ceremony. I'm at a birthday party. Like I'm there to bring that energy and to help facilitate that communication. And because a lot of our listeners here are people who are aspiring to become doulas or wanting to get into birth work or birth workers themselves. And so what are some tools or some suggestions as you were learning, because you and I both have degrees in this, right? Like we have master's degrees in
Yeah.
social work where we really really learn a lot about things like trauma informed care and about cultural humility and about how to meet people where they're at. Like that's like kind of the foundation of social work. And I think a reason a lot of doulas get into social work is because that overlap is so complementary. I got into social work because I felt as though I wasn't equipped enough as a doula to support my clients through loss. And that was what
Hmm.
inspired me to get into social work, to get more of those tools for the psychosocial, spiritual aspects of people's lives and really understand how to get to know them. So, my question for you, for our listeners, is what are some key tools that you think doulas or any kind of birth worker should have in their like tool belt in their toolbox for trauma informed care or for cultural humility, especially when dealing with populations that they might not be particularly familiar with, whether that's people coming from the prison system or it's someone like your mom.
Hmm.
Like just what are
Yeah.
the tools? Because all they're so overlapping.
Yeah, and there's so many tools, right? I feel
Hmm.
like the thing that I can say to someone entering this field, just as a doula in general, is
Hmm.
you can do this. Like, not to, it's kind of funny because as you and I are social workers, we have this like immediate credibility because we have an MSW. But I don't want to bash on the whole social work field. But honestly, like sometimes I think it's total BS because it just, I think like as well, working with folks that like maybe don't have the opportunity to have an education, but have this amazing lived experience.
Totally.
And these are people that I work with, that I serve. They know way more about the world than I do. But I get
Hmm.
stupid amounts of credibility because I have a master's degree in social work, and
Hmm.
which taught me how to talk about trauma-informed care and like have these labels around things. And I think like
Exactly.
you said this before we even started recording, but like yeah, those those words and phrases make you feel like you can't do this or you aren't good enough. And for anyone entering the field right now, I just want you to know you don't have to know all of those things. You already know all the things that you need, and you're going to be just fine because
Mm-hmm.
your desire and calling into this work makes you equipped to be an amazing doula already. You are not,
Mm-hmm.
no one is ever a doula because they want to be financially stable, unfortunately. Like, you're a doula because this is like a spiritual calling to you, and that's
Totally.
incredible. When it comes to like tools that you need, like the tools that you need will come into your path. Like the tools that I needed for me, I have like a different approach than other doulas. Everyone has their own approach, and so you attract your own unique clients. I'm very anatomical. I like to do like prenatal postpartum yoga stuff. That's like my training. And so that's a lot of my approach. And I'm also like ridiculous and comedic, and so I like do that. I'm just myself with my clients. And the minute I realized I could do that and I didn't need all the tools was the
Mm-hmm.
minute like birth work really started opening up for me and became way more fun. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when it comes to like just to speak specifically to trauma-informed care, I think trauma-informed care for me is restoring control to the person that is at the center of that experience and
Mm-hmm.
giving them that
Restoring
control.
control to the person. Yep.
Yeah. And, people think that you would want, as a birthing person, like everyone wants a happy, healthy baby and an amazing birth, but people actually want, more than anything else, control of the situation. That is how you walk out of the most traumatic births still with an amazing story. Because at every
Exactly.
point of that journey, they were
Mm-hmm.
able to have a moment of pause to really embody and feel the decision, be okay with it, and then move on.
Yep.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 1% of births are actually a rushed emergent situation. For the 99% of the other births, there's always a moment where you can just like have pause, control the situation, and then be able to say, okay, I'm okay with this. And then you walk out and you have, yes, happy, healthy baby, and you also have a good birth story that you're walking away with.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I feel as though and I prepare my clients and their partners for this, and hopefully the doulas listening, is that birth can be so chaotic and things can go completely off of the birth plan in every single way. But as long as that birthing person feels heard and seen and respected and valued and like they have autonomy over their experience, they're going to walk away from it. Even if it's a totally unplanned, scary cesarean, they're going to walk away from it feeling like they still have agency and power. And that is empowering. Like, that is how you have the positive birth experience. That is so important. I completely agree with you as well that this calling is a calling. And so you already have a lot of those tools. That to be trauma informed or to show up in a trauma informed way is to see someone's humanity and to remind them of their humanity and to defend their humanity. And I think that a tool there is, part of it is like releasing your own agenda. And then within that work is releasing your own biases or even becoming aware of your own biases, and that it's okay. Like, we're all conditioned. We all grow up in these same, well, different, but we all grow up with biases and context put on us constantly. And so I think that
Hmm.
so much of this work is figuring out how to unravel that and be like, okay, well, that was a social construction, say, from the Reagan era, or that's a social
Hmm.
construction from my own family story. So how can I show up here essentially an empty vessel to
Yeah.
just truly see this person's humanity and meet this person exactly where they're at without any preconceived notion about them? And that is a very achievable tool. It just takes a little bit of practice and a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah, 100%. I liked what you said about the empty vessel because it is that. I feel like people have this conception that, like, as a doula, we're like, you have to have an unmedicated birth and you're not
No.
giving birth unless, and it's like, and I
Yeah,
totally
yeah, yeah.
understand where that came from. But really, that's the hardest part about being a doula is that you're constantly doing this inner work to be like, where are my own biases showing up?
Hmm.
How are their biases showing up? How do those conflict with each other? What does this person really want? Do they want an epidural? Like, what is the appropriate time for that? Once you're in the work for long enough, you realize how much inner work it takes for you. And that's really
Hmm.
what got me on the social work path as well. It's all so spiritual, therapeutic, all of those things. But what calmed me when I was first starting, I remember reading um, like a report or an article from Rutgers University. They trained random people in folks' lives as doulas right before they gave birth. And these people were not really that equipped. They went through like 24-hour curriculum and then were able to call themselves doulas. Supported the person at the birth, and that alone, having a person feel empowered and informed enough to walk by the side of the person giving birth, that alone made birth outcomes dramatically different in a positive way than
Hmm.
the control group that had nobody. And so it made me
Hmm.
feel so much better of like, okay, I just graduated from my doula training. I don't know shit, but my presence alone as a witness of this experience is going to make it
Totally.
better for them.
Yep. Yep. Well, that's something that back to the like I'm infuriated and I feel so hopeful is that the use of continuous labor support is has evidence coming out the wazoo as that being positive. There's positive outcomes from continuous labor support, and it is supported by every organization out there.
Hmm.
Everyone that is in our field knows that continuous labor support is so crucial, and yet we're investing so much and putting right now there's the trend of induction at 39 weeks, like reducing
Hmm.
complications and reducing this and reducing that. And it's like that same study, but for continuous labor support, is so much more positive in the continuous labor support side, even if the mom is at 42 weeks, and for any person giving birth versus the control group of the 500 people that were of specific demographics, and it then being applied to the entirety of the population. So why, when a solution is so simple, that is of adding care, so simple, adding care. Why is that
Yeah.
not just part of every single birth experience, incorporated into every single hospital setting, into every single birth center setting? And so that's where I have
Yeah.
the hope. I'm like, cool. Like it really just takes the right pitch, and it's going to be the right people activating and wanting to be involved, which then leads into the example of the organization that you work with, and the work that you're doing is very much an example of that, of like, okay, here's a need, and this
Hmm.
inspires me so much. Here's a need, and here's a blueprint. Here's the steps of like, we're going to be doing these regular meetings prenatally. We're going to attend the birth. We're going to bring humanity to birth. We're going to advocate for the person postpartum so that they have at least 24 hours of skin to skin with their baby. And then we're going to do a whole year of follow up. Like, that's a beautiful blueprint that doesn't require extra infrastructure, that doesn't require loads of money to do things, and that is going
Hmm.
to drastically improve the life story of this person. It's not just like birth literally is the birth of a human being, and it is the birth of a mother, and there's so much there that is worthy of that nurturing. And now I am tangenting in my own passion, but I am saying this because this is so important. This is so important to me that everybody hears this. If you feel inspired by anything in this world, please go after it. Please go after it, especially if it is leading from the heart
Hmm.
and it is because you want to do good things in this world and you want to support other people. Like, there is ample opportunity for it. And so, like, when your group got started, it was an idea. And like when Wombs of the World got started, it was just an idea. And it's an idea that takes a whole lot of work and perseverance, but like it is so worthy, especially when the solutions we're presenting are so simple, just bringing humanity to birth.
Yeah, we totally overcomplicate so much of the human experience just out of,
So
in my
much.
opinion, ego, just so that we can kick people out of the room because they don't feel good enough or smart enough to talk to this. When at the end of the day, we actually have embodied life experience that creates
Hmm.
expertise within us. And I think like
100%.
something you spoke to that is really hard as a doula is like balancing the micro experience with the macro and
Hmm.
knowing that in your heart and soul as a doula that this is good and this is making a difference, but then seeing the ways that the system, whatever system that is, completely negates your experience or your professional
Hmm.
expertise as a doula and how that just doesn't serve the clients. And we all want, at least on paper, a great birth, healthy
Hmm.
baby, healthy mom. But I just find that our egos get in the way so much of that experience. And that's why I say it's such inner work. And I think the world would be such a more beautiful place, especially the birth world, if all of us just like came together, nurses, anyone that's in that birth room, and we're able to just realize what we're bringing to the table is all valuable.
Totally.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, and it saddens me that there is this divide and this like competition. There's room for everybody at this table of being part of the birth team.
So where I'm at in Portland, Oregon, I feel very lucky because I see a world where doulas are integrated into a lot of the hospitals, where when we talk about that macro piece, there has been so much done in terms of
Hmm.
doulas pushing the agenda politically to get bills passed. The reason that Ostara exists in Oregon is because we passed a bill that mandates doula care in the prison. And doulas in Oregon are able to bill Medicaid and Medicaid and are able to get paid back from that, which is not only helpful to people that need it the most, like some of the most marginalized people in our society or in our state need doula care the most, but also the people that are able to be doulas can have a living wage doing that.
Hmm.
And that's all
Hmm.
thanks to the macro work that the doulas before us, decided to do. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, but being a doula in different states too, it's just we have so much to learn from each other just within the one country of the US alone.
And that back to the hope, like there are so many people and places that are doing things so well. And we
Yeah.
can learn from that. And there's these blueprints that are available to us. We just need to continuously advocate. And I think by just existing as birth workers, existing as mothers, existing as sisters, existing as humans, we can
Yeah.
continuously advocate for this. But
Hmm.
in terms of, well, who needs to be leading this charge? Should it be the moms? Should it be the birth workers? We should all be leading this charge together to on a global scale, demand better. Demanding better is not complicated.
Yeah, exactly. We know we're doing our job right when someone who's not a birth worker at all is freely
Hmm.
talk about their birth experience or their miscarriage experience or their
Totally.
perinatal mental health. That for me is the key indicator of success because I talk about
Hmm.
this all the time, but there are still women out there being like, I had a miscarriage. I had no
Hmm.
idea this was a normal experience. I'm like, how?
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Well,
this.
we don't make space in our culture, we haven't. I think we are, and that's what's exciting. And with technology and our ability to communicate with each other and our ability to amplify these stories, and I think that once you're a birth worker and you're like deep enough in your work, that's all you. There's no separation. I'm like constantly
Hmm.
talking about it. It's like I'm like, all right, Thanksgiving dinner, let's go around and share our birth stories.
Yeah,
Like that's
100%.
like that's all I want to
Yeah,
talk
that's a
about.
key
And I
indicator that you should
yeah,
be a doula.
exactly. And I meet someone and I'm like, so how were you born? Like what's your birth
Yeah.
story? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, tell me about your mother, and that's
Yeah,
how I get to know
totally.
people because that's just um so yeah. Okay. If someone is listening to this and they're inspired and they're like, wow, you can be a prison doula, you can support women who are incarcerated and going through one of the most challenging, dehumanizing experiences, and you as a doula can bring that humanity back to their experience, and they're not in one of the states that your organization is working in. What would you suggest for this doula to do to get started?
And the biggest misconception with the prison system is that it's solvable. Prisons are not going to go anywhere in our lifetime. And the
No.
thing that I've learned the most about or folks with lived experience is just how deeply entrenched this system is in our society. It's not
Yeah,
just in prison. There's so many prisons within our one society. Like a hospital is a prison. We have, detention centers. We have jails, but then there's
totally.
also like holding periods of like parole and all these other things that I can name on and on. But my biggest recommendation to anyone wanting to get into this is to get trained as a prison doula specifically. I obviously have to shout out my own organization, the Ostara
Please.
Initiative. We do two trainings every year in different cities in the States, and it's just an amazing way to learn about this context because there's so much to learn, and you're learning about it from some incredible people who have literally lived through this. That is the most important place to start because we all want to change the world, but you gotta change yourself first, or whatever they say. Um, and really just learn what it is you're getting into. So yeah, start with the Ostara Initiative trainings, and then we are always expanding into other states, but people are doing this work all over the place, and there's always places to expand. Maybe pitching and like growing your network in that way is a
Hmm.
way to start this work as well. But I feel it very important to say we all want to be, a superhero, and fix the system, but there's a lot to learn before you really integrate yourself into the system. So I would really push people to prioritize their learning from people that have actually been victims to the system.
Mm. I think that that's a really beautiful reminder for a few things. One, I definitely think that there's so many of us, myself included, of like, I was a kid that wanted to save the world before having
Hmm.
any concept of like what that meant. But when you're a child and you have that kind of heart and ambition that I know so many children do, which is beautiful, we want to like miss that. And when I started programs in Tanzania, so I already had that travel experience, but as I've been hosting groups, that's something like deconstructing the concept of saviorism has been a really interesting journey for me as a facilitator for this, and wanting to kind of find that balance of like, yes, I love your heart, like I love where your heart is at, that you want to do so much good, but now we have to again see humanity, because I think what you're saying, it's like if somebody in the superhero context of I'm going to show up as a prison doula and I'm going to abolish the prison system and we're going to do this, and it's like, these like big, again, like trendy words or trendy statements that people kind of lash onto without the bigger contextual picture of what's going on. You have to have a tremendous amount of self-awareness and understand the system to understand how you can do the most good within the context that you're allowed to work in. And like
Hmm.
we're not going to be changing things overnight, but like literally, if we can support one mom, one birth, and prevent the cycle of generational incarceration,
Hmm.
that is a massive win. That is a massive, massive win. And it's like so tangible. And that's what's exciting, is that all of this is so tangible. We just need to keep going and not get discouraged. And that's what like excites me so much about the work that I get to do in the world with Wombs of the World. And I want my participants, whether that's students or our travelers, to collect all of these seeds that they can then go into their own community and like plant to harvest and share. So the doula training that we just put out, I am so proud of it because it has this global lens and it has all of these tools for potential doulas to learn from. The goal for the training for me was I want for anyone anywhere in the world to be able to take it, be able to look at their own context and see how they fit into it. Because somebody who is working as a birth worker in Oregon or in Tennessee or in Kenya is going to have a very different experience of how they're going to be entering birth work. And so I'm hoping that this training has enough tools in it for you to get started anywhere where you are and like bring this global perspective and essentially the humanity back to birth.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
exciting. So cool.
Thanks.
I've wanted to create a zine of like all the different cultural
Ooh.
traditions around birth that I've heard of along the way for so long, and you just like brought that idea back to my head. So maybe I'll
Love
start
it.
that after this
I
cast.
love it. Love it. That's amazing. All right, Edwina, can you tell us how we can get in touch with you or learn more about the Ostara Initiative?
Yeah. So you can go to the ostarainitiative.org. I won't spell it because it's just so long.
I'll put it
But
in
you'll
the description.
see. Perfect. We have different Instagrams for different projects that we have in the different states. So there's like the Oregon Prison Birth Project. We have our own Instagram, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Alabama, and the main Instagram for Ostara is called End Prison Birth. And of course, I work at this nonprofit, both as a prison doula and as a fundraiser. So your donations are always helpful, and they go right to our ladies that we are serving. So if you want to get involved, you can get involved either by actually doing the work hands-on or just by financially donating if that feels like your calling as well.
I am so inspired by you and by your work, and I hope that many others listening or watching feel similarly.
Heck yeah! Can't wait to see you all in this work as well.
Awesome. Okay, my last question. If you could send out a wish to the mothers of the world, to those that are getting ready to give birth, what is either like a wish you have for them or something that you wish that they knew, a seed of wisdom, of knowledge from your doula heart to the mothers of the world?
Something that I tell my clients, so my mind went to so many different places. Like, especially with when you just walk out of a birth, you're like, I really want to tell this client what I should have told them based on how their birth went, you know. My first thought was like, your pelvic floor is really tight. You know, like, do more work on your pelvic floor. But that's not all cultures and not all mothers in the world. So my second thought was matrescence the birth of a mom is a real thing, and we focus so much on the birth of a baby, but ultimately that is a blip of the experience. And if you
Yes.
could honor that period of your life or someone else's life as so extremely delicate. People say that postpartum just like
Mm,
never ends. We say, I mean, the American system says 6 weeks, you go back to work, which is crazy. But other systems say 12 months, 10, 12 months. Even then, you're a new person forever. And that is something I find we still have a really hard time talking about or understanding.
yeah.
And so if there's a mom out there listening to this, or just a person in general, just like really honoring that time in someone's life and realizing how fragile and vulnerable it is, and asking yourself what you could do to take care of yourself or to take care of that person that you're thinking of is just so important and so world changing if we just realize how important that period is and that birth of
Mhm.
a parent is.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much for being with me here today. It's been a beautiful, beautiful conversation and just incredible to get to know you and your work a little bit more. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me. Oh my gosh, there's so much crossover in our lives and in this work. So I'm just like, I just feel really like kismet that the world brought us together. So thanks for having me.
Mwah. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for listening to today's incredibly inspiring episode. I hope that you feel like you have new tools and that you are also inspired to get to work in new ways in your community and know that the work of birthwork is so powerful and the ripple effects can literally heal the world. So keep up the good work. If you would like to learn more about our full spectrum doula training or any trip we have coming up, please visit our website, wombsoftheworld.com, or find us on all social media at Wombs of the World. I'm sending you all my love, and I hope you take excellent care of your womb.